Hi guys. Okay, so today what we're going to be having a look at is how to write an essay with the lottery. So here we go. Alright, so let me just pull up the PowerPoint. Now you have access to this PowerPoint as well, so you can always go back and have a look at bits if you need to. Alright, so writing an analytical essay with the lottery. Now the first thing I do want to point out is when you are talking about the short story The Lottery, we put it in inverted commas. That's because it's not the title of the book, it's a title of the short story. You're referring to the short story, so it should be in inverted commas, okay? Every time you mention the title of the short story, okay? It's so that we can distinguish when you're talking about the lottery, as in the collection, the lottery, the short story, and obviously the actual lottery. So, the first thing you need to think about is picking the right question for you, okay? Now, you'll have an option of two different questions, and what you want to do is pick the question that you feel like you've got the most to say about. If there's one that you kind of go, yeah, I agree, well then it's going to be hard to go further than just one paragraph. You really have to have a question that there's a bit of meat to. So the question that I'm doing for my example is this one. Shirley Jackson encourages the reader to criticise aspects of the world. Discuss. Okay, so that's my question. Now the reason I like that one is because there's the word discuss there, which gives me a bit of freedom to kind of, say yes, say no, and also kind of like look wider. So I do like a discuss question. So yeah, all right. Once you've picked your question, you then need to highlight the key terms. Now, key terms are the words that are kind of super important in the question, words that you really need to address. And the reason that we highlight them is so that we remember to keep coming back to them. Because every time you use those keywords in your essay, it's almost like a little wave to your marker, kind of going, look, I'm answering the question. There it is. Ha ha ha. So they're words that you really want to be very familiar with and you want to make sure that you're using lots. So here I've got the words that are important are encourages, criticize, aspects of the world. Okay, now that aspects of the world is obviously going to kind of have quite a lot of different synonyms because obviously I'm going to be talking about the different aspects of the world that it's looking at. And criticize, obviously I can use some pretty good synonyms for that as well. So I might kind of say examine, I might say something like look down upon, something like that. So synonyms are really good to use as well. All right, so once I've done that, then I start writing out things like my contention. It's good to write out your contention early so that you've got a bit of an idea of where you're sort of heading with the question. So a contention basically is what you think the answer to the question is. In kind of, one or two sentences. Write this out as a statement using those keywords that we just had. So here I've got, so my question is, Shirley Jackson encourages the reader to criticize aspects of the world. Discuss. My contention is that I'm saying Jackson encourages the reader to view the darker side of human nature and to both criticize and understand it. So can you see how that word discuss kind of gives me a little bit of elbow room? I can kind of go into interesting little sidebars. All right, so that's my contention. Now, once I've written out my contention, I then move into planning my arguments and if I've got time, my evidence as well. Okay, it's definitely worth putting a little bit of extra time into your planning because you'll find that if you've got a good plan, then everything, when you get to the writing side, everything kind of goes a lot smoother because you've kind of already thought about the process rather than trying to kind of think on your feet as you're writing, which can sometimes not only make it much more anxiety, give you much more anxiety about the whole process. But also, I find anyway that I find it's much more likely that I'm going to go off on tangents. So that's just my tip. Okay, so I've got my contention. Now I'm planning my arguments. So I've got one. This is my first argument. Jackson shows the reader the darker side of human nature through the character's insistence on carrying out a tradition, despite it being considered obviously morally wrong to the audience. The decision is criticised by the reader as unnecessarily cruel. Okay, so that's my first argument. Okay, that I'm looking at the darker side of human nature because they're carrying out that tradition and it's really unnecessarily cruel. Then the second argument I'm going to have is Jackson also shows the reader's lack of empathy, shown by the unaffected townsfolk, that they don't care that they're hurting somebody. They have no real emotion behind the lottery. This encourages the reader to criticise their callousness, but also understand their mindset of relief and desperation. So talking about how, yes, we do criticise that they're really callous and they don't care about one another, but also understanding that relief comes from that callousness comes from the fact that they're relieved that it wasn't them. Okay? So, they're my plans, they're my arguments, looking at the darker side of human nature and the two ways that it's shown in the lottery. All right, so let's talk about intros next. Click on the next video and you can have a look at what you need to do for an intro.